still even have my my study cards from boards.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You got your little black book with the notes in it?
I have my notes.
I have mine too.
I was a little non-traditional. I used to have like I made like little mini posters so that I could review it because anyway, I taught like how to pass the boards. Yeah, exactly. And so I used to stick them all over my house. Like they'd be everywhere. God bless my roommate, right? And so literally our walls would be covered. So as you walk through the apartment, you would visually see different things that you would study for boards because there's no time to go back to review it. And so trying to keep it fresh in your head, sometimes just looking at the poster and seeing like this sale or seeing like this medication, you might remember like, oh yeah, I got that wrong yesterday. The answer is this. And so that's literally what I did for every single board exam.
You're a visual learner.
I am. I'm visual. I'm visual. I'm tactile. I'm a little auditory, but I need to be able to see it.
I have to be able to see it, and if we could have a cartoon for this virus and how it affects the virus.
I need a cartoon. I did not make your cartoon yet. I'm not. I know we need a cartoon. I tried to find one, and it was a little bit harder to find than I thought. So I was like, man, we got to make it up on our own.
We should be able to find an illustration artist and whatnot who could design that. That'd be. I mean, that would be awesome.
Hey, Pastor, there's some people trying to get in. I don't know on your side who is letting them in or not.
Yeah, my daughter, Minister.
Okay.
She's the one kind of orchestrating everything. And,
all right.
He drafted me at the last minute.
I'm so thankful. I just wanted to let you all in first, so you all can it.
Okay. All right.
We good. We've already talked.
We're ready.
All right, you ready?
You smart like your dad and your mom.
you kind.
They laying on heavy tonight.
Like Dr. Jones said, I'll take that any day. I'll take that. So I'm just waiting on the media team to let me know when they're ready to stream. And I was just taking the cues from you all when y'all are ready to let me.
Well, we're past time, Lillian, so we need to start at 6:35.
Right.
Okay, we are live now.
Pastor.
We're live now?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, we want to express our gratitude to God for allowing us to have this opportunity to come together in this forum and symposium so that we can get the information from some experts to help us what we're wrestling with in the season of pandemic. And we're thankful that we have Dr. Jackie Jones, Dr. Rudolph Wise, and Mr. Vince Ford Sr. And they are going to be our panel for the evening. And I will lead in a brief word of prayer and then turn it over to Brother Ford, who will facilitate our gathering for the evening. So maybe bow together in prayer. God, we thank you for all of your blessings. We're grateful for this privilege and opportunity to come together in order to gain added information as well as inspiration. And we know that people will perish because of lack of knowledge. And we are already seeing that 500,000 people have perished because of this dreaded disease. We ask that you would use our panelists as instruments to impart the information, and those who will join will receive it and make informed decisions about their future. We're grateful and we claim the victory even now as we ask in the strong, saving, and satisfying name of Jesus. Your service prayer. Amen.
Amen.
We want to thank our panelists for being here with us tonight, and we are grateful to all of those who are tuning in by virtual means to the symposium. So at this time, I will turn it over into the hands of Brother Vince Ford Sr., who will lead us.
Pastor Scott, thank you so much. And thank you so much for your dedication to improving our community, not just today, but over the years. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your church congregation for always being first and foremost in helping our community. So we want to thank you so much for that as well. I want to thank, thank you, sir. I want to thank Ms. Roberts and Ms. Jones, and to all the other members of Ms. Melinda Scott for help organize this behind the scenes. We are fortunate tonight to have Dr. Rudy Wise. Most of you know Dr. Rudy Wise, and a reasonable newcomer. She's from Chicago, but we're going to claim her now in Columbia, Dr. Jackie Jones, and they'll be able to answer all of your clinical questions. I'll be able to share some information about some of the things that are going on in terms of on the ground related to COVID vaccines. But you've already listed a series of questions. We're going to jump on those. I see my good friend Deacon Melvin and some others, Corwin Scriven and some others on the call. Excited about seeing you all. And thank you all so much for being here. Stacy McPhail is also on the call from Prisma Health and maybe some others as well. As Dr. Pastor Scott said, what we want to end up with tonight is for you to be more informed and more educated. We're not here tonight to try to convince you to take the virus, the vaccine, but we are here tonight to try to give you factual information. We would encourage you to use Dr. Jones, Dr. Wise, and ask questions that you may have wanted to ask, but otherwise you have not asked, or you've asked before, so others can get the benefit of that question. We would also encourage you, please don't get your information from the internet, even from your friends or hallway or parking lot conversations. We want you to get it from, I would encourage you that even if you don't ask a question tonight and you have some vaccine hesitancy, please talk to your primary care doctor or physician who can give you factual information about the vaccine. There is, in fact, vaccine hesitancy all across the country, and particularly related to African Americans. The reason this call is so important is for a couple of reasons. One is we have Pastor Scott on here, and I say that sincerely because it's through the work of pastors and being an influencer. And he said earlier, because he took it, other people may consider taking it as well. That is so important. And the fact that we have our church congregation here so that you can hear this factual information about many of the questions that we've heard. So we're going to stop right there. I want to recognize Sandra Sims. She's on here. Sandra is one of our board members, and appreciate her. And the leader of all leaders, Brother Harrison Reardon, on here as well. So I better stop before I start calling all the names on here. I'm going to ask Dr. Jones, if you don't mind making some opening comments. And then I'll ask Dr. Wise to do the same. And then we'll jump into some of your questions that you've already established, or you can ask us additional questions. Dr. Jones.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jones. I'm a family medicine physician here in Columbia, South Carolina. I spend most of my time in the outpatient setting, so taking care of patients who are not sick enough to be in the hospital, but still have care and needs that need to be met. We'll get to most of the things about COVID in our questions, which I think is a better way to do it. So a little bit about me and why we've been doing these is that, we have been in the office, never shut down since COVID started. And one of the things that's happened as an outpatient clinician is that you see, from a patient standpoint, the transitions of, the process of COVID. And so in the beginning, I think everybody was thinking, okay, if I get COVID, I hope I live and I hope I don't end up on an intubator and die. And that seemed to be the focus. But there was way more things that happened in between that, which were happening in my office. And that was the long-term effects of COVID, how it was making you feel real time and what we do to go from there. And then on top of that, we got into comorbidities and other diseases that some people already had and trying to optimize their health as best as possible. And it dawns on me that COVID is devious in many ways, and its long-term effects and its impact are probably beyond the scope of what we get in news clips. So it became really important to, one, educate people about what they were risking or not risking as they took care of their health, whether that have been maintaining 6 feet or wearing a mask or washing their hands, all the way to, make a decision on whether or not to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And so I just want to, answer questions and kind of have dialogue about what it is, what it isn't. And hopefully, people can take that information and do things to protect themselves and keep their family safe.
Sounds good. Dr. Wise, any opening comments?
First of all, thank you, Reverend Scott and Mr. Ford, and my colleague, Dr. Jones, for asking me to participate in this workshop or panel, if you will, in an attempt to educate the community, especially the African American community, about this COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, as it has been stated, our people have been decimated by this illness, unfortunately. But this is not new, and there continues to exist a lot of fear and anxiety about taking this vaccine among African Americans, and it goes way back. It goes way back. Just a brief history. After the Civil War, there was no health care provided to those who were enslaved, so-called free. There was no health care system at all. They died. They died from disease. They died in the Civil War. We didn't have any schools, no hospitals at all when we were so-called freed. So what happened to us? So we were ultimately able in the late 1800s to develop our own hospitals, our own medical schools. And what happened over time, we lost those hospitals and schools through integration and segregation, which to my way of thinking, over the years, it's a double-edged sword, I think. But be that as it may, here we are with this pandemic. There have been pandemics, epidemics over the years. The last one 100 years ago, 1918, took 50 million people worldwide died from it. 50 million people worldwide died from the pandemic of 1918, of which 750,000 people in the United States died. And we're at 500,000 in the United States, on track to be the same death toll as it was 100 years ago. What's different between that span of 100 years? We've got vaccines. A lot of people say that been rushed to make the vaccine and the term warp speed and whatnot, which I think was a misnomer. But again, research over the past 100 years has been absolutely phenomenal. So it's no surprise to me and to Dr. Jones that we made this vaccine in short order. No, the research has been ongoing. It's been ongoing back from HIV, back to Ebola, back to the SARS virus back in 2002. So the research has been ongoing. So that's why we're at this place with the vaccine development, which is absolutely phenomenal. And again, we're here to try to give information and to dispel the disinformation and misinformation that's caused our people to be hesitant to take the vaccine. I'm retired medical oncologist. I've been oncologist for about 4 years, but I'm still licensed to practice in this state. I still do my CMEs. I keep engaged in healthcare because our people need to be taken care of. And I commend my colleague, Dr. Jones, for being there in the forefront, being young and talented and whatnot. And Mr. Ford, he's always been taking care of the community. He's always been there. Yes, he's VP for community outreach, but he has done a tremendous job since I've known him over the past 40 plus years and whatnot. And again, to you, Vince, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wise. Dr. Jones, Dr. Wise touched on this. Can you elaborate a little bit more? You and I and Dr. Wise and others, we keep hearing about how fast this vaccine has come about. That's a question in the African-American community, and one of the reasons why they're hesitant about taking it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a common question amongst doctors, amongst, people in the community was, how did we get here so fast? And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that were going on before COVID-19 hit. So one, this is not our first round of the SARS coronavirus. This is actually SARS coronavirus 2. So SARS coronavirus 1 happened a few years ago. Nobody was really paying attention in the United States because it was primarily happening in China. But in China, it was a very big deal. Like, there were lots of things going on They shut down a whole apartment complex. It was a huge international sensation, but as things in America goes, it just didn't get that much attention. However, people were alarmed at, how it spread, how easily it mutated. And so scientists were at work, finding medications, talking about vaccines, but it quickly died off. It kind of mutated out. We shelved it. There was not a lot of interest in the scientific community. Well, there's not a lot of money in the scientific community, and not a lot of interest scientifically nationwide to really get it going. And so SARS coronavirus 1 went away until SARS coronavirus 2 came out. So we were able to take some of the information that we learned from SARS coronavirus 1 and kind of use it to see how it would help its sister virus that came along that was a little bit more contagious, and it loves humans a lot, right? So they used that. Now, this is something else that's been going on for about 30 years, is that we've had an international community of scientists that have been doing research trying to figure out how to vaccinate from things like HIV. Now, we've not found a vaccine for HIV yet, but in the process of that, we've found lots of technology and advancement on what we can use to vaccinate from viruses like the virus that we're dealing with today. And so you kind of take that whole community that really halted a lot of things they were doing and got very focused on figuring out what we can do to help vaccinate from the virus that caused COVID-19. Also, people are like, but this is a new technology, this mRNA virus Moderna and Pfizer are using, and it's actually not that new. So we've been playing with mRNA viruses since the 1990s, I think, is the first research studies you can find that were done in animal trials. And I want to say the first human studies that were done, related to mRNA viruses started in 2003 or something like that. So this has kind of been around for a long time. I think what you're seeing is what happens when money and science come together, right? So scientists spend a lot of time begging for money. They're always begging for money. They need money for their materials. They need money for their research labs. Some of them, if they don't get their research labs, that's their job. Well, all of a sudden, it was a pandemic. The global community needed help, and they had money to throw. And science said, okay, give me the money and I can make it happen. And so what you're seeing is all that technology come together with a little bit of money and a lot of interest, and you can get a lot done when somebody's opening their pocketbooks, and you get the brains of an entire, world. So that's how we get here.
Yeah, so, we also hear, and I want to start with some of the things that we're hearing in all of our different virtual town hall meetings. We hear people saying that white people are getting one vaccine and Black folk are getting another vaccine. Hear that more and more over and over. Yeah. Either one of you want to speak to that?
That's not true. That's not true. The two vaccines that are out there are the messenger RNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer. Those are the two vaccines that have been approved for use at this point in time. In terms of clinical trial vaccines, there are over 200 plus worldwide that are being studied and whatnot. So again, what we have available now are the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines and whatnot, with the efficacy or effectiveness of 94 to 95%. There is another one, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is a DNA-based vaccine. And probably, Dr. Jones, from what I understand from the literature and the news and whatnot, and Dr. Fauci, that may be coming on board. They've already applied to the FDA for emergency use, and we may be seeing that vaccine coming on board within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I understand as well, that they are finishing up their phase 3 and applying for the approval. So I think if they hit their numbers that they had proposed in phase 3, I think they will get the green light to do it.
So that'll give us 3 vaccines.
Yeah, we believe that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is going to help us in terms of our efforts out in the community. One of the things that has prohibited us up to this point from taking the vaccine out in the community is because the Pfizer vaccine has to be cold stored below 90 degrees below, and the Moderna vaccine has to be in a deep freezer as well. We now have purchased freezers to take out on our mobile units. We were in Weber School this past Saturday, where we vaccinated close to 180 residents in that area. So we're taking it out in some of the remote and rural areas. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine does not have to be cold stored. It can be in a regular freezer. And so when that arrives, we'll be taking that out a lot more. So start to listen up for our mobile unit, as we will. One of your church members, Stacy McPhail's on here. She's helped responsible for rolling the mobile unit out. We're going to be up in the north part of the county in about another week or so, trying to vaccinate people in that community as well. We've received a question about spike protein and to talk a little bit about the spike protein. So let me read the question. Can anyone provide a detailed explanation concerning the production of spike protein that the vaccine elicits from its host?
Wait, can you ask it again?
Can anyone provide a detailed explanation concerning the production of spike protein that the vaccination elicits from its host?
Okay.
This is where a cartoon model would work very well. Okay, let's try to sort of keep it sort of simplistic. Okay, the DNA in the virus tells gives the information to the RNA in the virus to make the protein. Okay, to go into the cytoplasm of the virus to make the protein, to make the spike protein. Okay, so the DNA codes the messenger RNA to make the spike protein. Okay, so the RNA makes the spike protein that's on the surface of the virus. Not just for but that's for any virus. Okay, that's how it works. The DNA gives the information to tell the RNA to make the spike protein on the virus. Okay, let's sort of keep it simple, because if we get caught up into the weeds and whatnot, then we'll miss because there are others on this call and whatnot who may not understand the weeds and whatnot. So we don't want to get into the weeds. And Dr. Jones, I hope so with you also, that we'll keep it out of the weeds and keep it to a level where everybody on the Zoom can understand. Okay. So the messenger RNA makes the spike protein. Okay, it tells the cell, the virus, to make the spike protein. Okay.
All right. Can anyone explain the vaccination research over in Europe, where they're using dead or inactive whole viruses to produce a vaccination that may be available in the United States by 2021?
What I know about the European vaccine is it's the first one where they're using inactivated virus proteins, and we do those kind of vaccinations all the time in the United States for different things. It's just a different approach, right? And so, like Dr. Wise was saying, there are several vaccine studies in the work, and a lot of them are using different approaches. They're going traditional old school, using a weekend live version of the vaccine. They're going also another traditional route. We're using completely inactivated vaccine. So everybody's got their different approach. Some people are using other virus vectors, using things like Pfizer, Moderna, mRNA, all those things. That study is an inactivated virus. It's early though. It's like phase 1, 2.
Yeah,
so
it's way early. Yeah, it's way early.
It's very early. So they're still asking them in phase 1 and 2. You're asking yourself like two questions, like, is it safe? And what's the dosage of the vaccine that you're going to do? So I don't know what's going to happen with that study. They've got many more steps to go. They're still in their like preclinical. They're not preclinical, but their phase 1, phase 2 is using the smallest group of people you can to answer that question. So they have not expanded to their full study group or anything like that. So, we'll have to watch that as it goes. But for right now, it's kind of in the mix with all the other viruses. So I remembered I saved something, Dr. Wise. And so I don't know if people can see this.
There we go.
All right, so let's talk about, we're going all the way back science. Okay, so there's a central dogma, if I may, about how we make things. So you all are a bunch of proteins, okay, whether you know it or not, from your hair to your nails to your skin, all that stuff. just a bunch of proteins all stuck together. All right. So we make proteins in a very particular way as the body. So every single cell has a master template, right? So you got two copies of genes from your parents, like you remember all this kind of stuff. And so that makes up your cell. So every single cell in your body is made up, and that's your DNA, right? So DNA is your template. From your DNA, you can make a template for anything. So if my body said, hey, I think Dr. Jones needs another eyelash, then my DNA is going to make an eyelash mRNA, which is going to build the protein that makes my eyelash, right? We do it for our hair, our tongue, our skin, your lips, your whatever, your eyes, all your organs. You do this over and over and over again. This virus that you have does not have its own DNA, okay? COVID-19 virus does not have its own DNA. It is an mRNA protein. So what essentially it does, it hijacks your own DNA and says, hey, can you write this mRNA for me? And so I can make some proteins so that I can replicate. And so that's what you're doing. So when the virus spits out all these little proteins, they have spikes on them, right? So I'll draw spikes. I don't know if y'all gonna be able to see them or not, but this is what happens when you come to see me in my clinic. So I draw on everything. Nothing is safe. All right. So can y'all see those spikes?
Yeah.
So think of those spikes as a key. The problem with COVID, the SARS coronavirus, is that these keys open up like everything. Imagine finding the janitor's keys for a building just on the floor and being like, what can I get into? Everything, right? Every single thing. So the virus has keys to get into your lungs, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas. It gets into your skin. It gets to your intestines. So that's why people have so many symptoms, right? Some people say, oh, well, I only had diarrhea. Some people say, well, I only had lost taste and smell. Some people say I couldn't breathe for days. Some people cough. Some people vomit. I mean, people do everything because it really depends on what it decides to get into. So your Moderna and your Pfizer vaccine said, fine. What if we introduced just this part? If we rebuilt that and introduced this part, so every time something that looked like this rolled into your body, it would send your alarm system off. That is essentially what vaccines do, okay? So vaccines are like ADT for your body, right? Like they're a gigantic guard dog. So anytime something comes in and looks like something that's not supposed to be there, like this virus or chicken pox or measles or rubella or flu, once it comes in, the whole system goes on red alert and it starts sending every available immune system cell it can to kill whatever is in it that's not supposed to belong. So when you ask the question, how does the M protein work? The M protein, which is the key on that virus, is we make it so we send the system into early defense mechanisms. That is what Moderna and Pfizer are doing. Now, there are lots of variations of spike protein. So people want to say, oh, you made the spike protein. Now I hear about all these mutations. What's going to happen? Well, we build contingency plans because to not make it complicated, we know that these viruses, like the SARS coronavirus 2, they're messy because they don't have their own stuff, right? And so when you're using somebody else's stuff to make yours, you don't necessarily do it the way they would do it, right? So we know they're going to make mistakes and we know they're going to be variations of the spike protein. So you make your vaccine to protect as many variations as you possibly can. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best you have in the moment. And in this case, for Moderna and Pfizer, it's pretty good because 94-95% effectivity rate is kind of the creme de la creme, the top of the line on what vaccines cover. Most vaccines don't cover you 94-95%, but this one does in this case. So we're hoping that whatever mutation that happens to anything, what doesn't get mutated is the spike protein so much that your vaccine doesn't work. And as for right now, it's working.
All right. Sounds good. So as a Black parent, what should my message for my 16-year-old female athlete who's now practicing with restrictions on her volleyball team? What are the spread rates among her age group? And what can she do to protect herself fully when school opens back up?
We see it all the time in athletes, the football players, the basketball players, those contact sports and whatnot. And, when you're watching these athletes play, be it a football player, a basketball player, a volleyball player. They're sweating, they're breathing, they're on each other. And keep in mind, this virus loves the respiratory system, okay? So when you see them out there and they don't, when they're on the court, they don't have their mask on. There's no mask on. So they're breathing on each other, and this virus is, if they're positive and whatnot, that's why they're all tested. That's why all the time games get postponed, they get canceled and whatnot, because several of the players have tested positive. And again, this COVID virus is very contagious. It's highly contagious and whatnot. And that's why you're seeing so many of the athletes, be they volleyball players, or basketball players, or football players, all the time games are canceled and whatnot because 2 or 3 of the players have tested positive. They have the luxury of being tested anytime, at any moment, okay? They can get the rapid test done, and that's very beneficial. But to answer the question, again, they're at risk. They're at risk. So when they're out on the court playing and whatnot, they have to make sure that all the other players and the opponents, that they've all tested negative before going out on that court. They have to be negative. Nobody playing should be positive on that court. They have to be tested before going on the court.
Sounds good. Is there
positive? They're going to get it.
Is there anywhere that young people can go and get information about the vaccine to read? I would recommend you can go on the CDC website. You can go on DHEC's website.
Right.
I think I sent Ms. Roberts a toolkit with some frequently asked questions. And Ms. Jones, if I did not, I'll send that tomorrow. But we'll make sure you get the information. Any other resources, Dr. Jones, Dr. Wise?
I'm
gonna keep it simple, kind of, Doc.
Dr. Jones, the American College of Pediatrics and whatnot.
I haven't been on the American College of Pediatrics site recently looking for what they've said about COVID. I mean, it's a good site, but sometimes it can be a little clunky in the navigation. And you got to know what you're looking for. And sometimes you need to log in to gain access. But the CDC is a good site because they have put it in bullet points to process it for like the layman, right? Like it isn't heavy in the science. It's just like giving you the facts and going. So I think it's a good spot to start.
One of the other questions is, what should schools do in terms of opening back up? I'll start with a response. We are working with the local school systems. We're working with the superintendents and the nurses to share with them what we think they need to do to open schools back up. So that's everyone inside the Prisma Health footprint. We're also extending that to private and charter schools as well. We're going to set up vaccination sites for them. Some of them want to do it themselves on their respective campuses. We're also referring them to one of our locations. Let me encourage everyone on here, if you haven't gotten a vaccine, and we'll talk about this at the end, go on prismahealth.org/mychart. prismahealth.org/mychart. And if you haven't gotten your vaccine, you can go ahead and set up your own account so that when you're eligible, you can then start to schedule an appointment. For those of you, and as I look around, right now the eligibility is 65 and above. No one on here meets that criteria right now. But once you get 65, you can sign up on MyChart and you can schedule a vaccine. Right now, we're doing the vaccines on the Baptist campus and the Baptist auditorium. We're doing it at Gamecock Park. We're probably going to be moving Gamecock Park because it's outside and we've had to endure the weather conditions. And actually, when it's raining, we have to cancel that site, that location. But we're looking for a separate location for Gamecock Park. Schools can go there. Educators can go to any one of those sites if they're eligible right now, to 65 and above, or school nurses right now eligible. Somebody might ask the question, why aren't all educators eligible? Well, that starts with the governor and DHEC that determines the eligibility criteria. And we're having to honor that criteria as we move forward. But I will tell you that schools are, I would talk to your local schools to see what their plans are. Each school and each school district is different. But they are preparing to do the things that they need to do to bring kids back probably real soon, full time. If not 5 days a week, certainly 4 days a week. But that is in the process of occurring. You could also call the CVS, Walgreens, some Kroger's, some Publix, your FQHCs, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be rolling our mobile unit out to different communities real soon as well. Here's another question. The African American community has many comorbidities, and I won't go through all of those, hypertension, obesity. Can you elaborate on COVID affects the body when there's a comorbidity?
Yeah, that's, and this is, for lack of a better word, this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the decimation that this pandemic has done to the African American community. There is a complication that occurs when someone becomes infected with COVID and symptomatic, so they have the COVID illness, if you will. 1 in 5 or 20% will develop what they call this very aggressive hyperactivity of the immune system of the body, trying to get rid of the virus. And in the process, it produces a profound amount of what we call cytokines, which are proteins and other cells in the body, certain types of T cells, trying to kill this COVID virus. And in the process, it creates a profound immune response, and it's termed cytokine storm. And this storm, what it does is that it causes hypotension, it causes shock, it causes fluid in the lungs, it causes blood clots, it causes almost any organ system can be affected by what we call the cytokine storm. Fortunately, it only occurs in about 20% of individuals who are hospitalized with COVID. But the mortality rate or the death rate from the cytokine storm is about 80 to 85%. So that's not where you want to be. And in those individuals who already have impaired organ function, hypertension causing cardiac dysfunction or congestive heart failure, diabetes mellitus causing vascular disease, strokes, ischemia of the legs, decreased blood supply to the legs. This cytokine storm is deadly in those individuals. And African Americans, the illnesses that we have, hypertension, diabetes, and those two illnesses leads to chronic kidney disease. If you go into Prisma Health, if you go into the dialysis unit, out of every 10 patients in the dialysis unit, 7 to 8 are African Americans. Okay, so the cytokine storm is deadly. It carries a mortality or death rate of 80 to 85%. Fortunately, it only occurs in about 20% of hospitalized patients, but this is deadly. And in those individuals who are ill and African Americans, especially African American men, they do not do a good job of taking care of their health. I practiced for 35 plus years, so I saw it, okay? When I would go into the barber shop and they would talk about everything but their health. They would talk about everything but their health. I would ask them, did you take your blood pressure medicine? What's your blood pressure reading? Well, I don't know, doc. What's your blood sugar reading? Well, I don't know. When did you last see a doctor? Well, I don't go to the doctor because I don't feel bad. And I go out to the car and take the blood pressure, and he's 170 over about 95 to 100. We have to do a better job of taking care of ourselves, because this COVID illness is devastating. It's devastating. it is killing the African American population right and left. I think right now in the United States, out of the 500,000 deaths, I think about 65, almost 70,000 have been African Americans and whatnot. That's a lot of deaths. That's a lot. That's a lot.
So, Dr. Jones, if a person contracts COVID, should they have a physical with their provider to see what organs have been affected?
There is no test to determine what organs have been affected except for your clinical information. So we don't need to do some standard test to say, okay, now that you have COVID, we need to do all this, and this to see what is affected. We don't have to do that. But it brings up an interesting point that the question will remain is, what did it affect? Mm-hmm. We will find out as we go. So I get a lot of people that call and say, all right, doc, I got COVID. So what's next? And they're disappointed when I say you go home, you shelter in place for 10 days, and then we'll see what happens as we go. So that is what happens, right? There is not a lot of magic unless you get too sick to be able to just ride it out. Then you end up in the hospital sometimes. In some cases, we can send you to an infusion center for medications, but no physical. No standard physical. I do check in on my patients at least once, depending on how sick they are, just to make sure everything is okay. I want to know that they're at home breathing okay, they're not having any symptoms, nothing that triggers an alarm. Sometimes I have to tell people, you are sicker than what you think. You know, we need to, go and do something different. And then a lot of people are at home, they're doing fine, even though they don't feel very well, but at least it's a chance to check in to make sure they know what's safe for home and what needs to go to the hospital.
If a person had COVID, how long should they wait after quarantining to get the vaccine?
2 weeks. So after your quarantine, you're free to get the vaccine. So I know I have talked to a lot of people in a lot of different states, and I don't know who's on the news saying this. And I know it's a doctor, and if I find them, I'll call them myself. But if you've had COVID, after you sheltered for your 2 weeks, you are eligible to get the vaccine. The only time that you need to wait that 90 days, right, that 3-month window, is if you got a specific treatment. Like we sent you for an infusion treatment. It's called monoclonal therapy.
Right.
But if we sent you for some kind of treatment and, you know, you're like, that was a little bit different than what I'd heard other people getting, then it's time to call someone like me or your primary care doctor to say, can you tell me what I had, or here's the record of what I had. Do I need to wait? You may need to wait 90 days. There are some people that are on autoimmune, that have autoimmune diseases, and you will also take immune modulators and different things like that. If you do, you got to talk to your primary care doctor or your rheumatologist to see, okay, I'm on this medicine. Do we need to stop it? And then I get my vaccine. So some of those questions need to be answered. But just for, I got COVID, I was at home for 2 weeks, and now I'm back and I want to get my vaccine, absolutely sign up.
Right. And to that point, to expand on that, you know, you can develop a symptomatic COVID even after you have gotten your first dose and you hadn't gotten your second dose yet. Okay, you will still get your second dose, you know, after you've recovered and whatnot. So, you know, that's the reason why you have to get both doses. And the first dose gives you about, what, Dr. Jones, maybe 55% effectiveness. That's why you need the second dose of the booster to get you up to that 94, 95%. So you don't want to delay that at all. You want to get that. And again, even if you've developed COVID after your first dose and whatnot, once you recover, you get your second dose. You know.
So if you've taken the Pfizer vaccine, the first dose, try to make sure you take the Pfizer vaccine as your second dose. That is really important. If you've taken the Moderna as your first dose, make sure you take it Moderna. What you're going to have is a card. Wherever you go to get your vaccine, they're going to give you a card, and it's going to have some important information on there. It's going to tell you what dose you took, what day you took the vaccine, where you took it, and it's going to give you another number. If you took Pfizer, they're going to tell you that you need to get your second dose around the 21st day. If you took Moderna, they're going to tell you need to get it around the 28th day. And then they're going to have a plus minus either 2 or 4, which means you can get it within 2 days before that 21st day or 2 days after. Now that time has been expanded. So you're still fine. If you don't get your second shot on that 21st or 28th day, just make sure you schedule it to get it the first available time that you can get it. Now, let's talk about these big elephants in the room. One is to the two doctors. As I hear from African Americans all the time, they say, we don't trust healthcare systems. We don't trust medical providers. They've never treated African Americans right. Even as we speak today, that is still pretty prevalent. We all know about Tuskegee. We know all about withholding medicine over different times. So why should we trust the healthcare system now to think that they're doing something that's in our best interest? Why should we trust it?
And you have to know your history. If you don't know your history, you're going to be walking blind. You know, as I made my opening remarks, again, there was no health care for the enslaved after they were freed, so-called freed, okay? We had no health care system at all. We had no schools, okay? We were treated worse than the livestock that they cared for on the plantation and whatnot. Now, after we were freed, we had no hospitals to go to. We had no health care. So a lot of those free enslaved went back to the plantation that they left because they had nothing. You have to know the historical perspective. It's very important. Carter G. Woodson said that if you don't know your history, then you don't know where you're going to. You have to know your history. So yes, we were mistreated when we were brought over on the ship. We were mistreated in the bowels of the ship, shackled down. We were mistreated on the plantations. We were mistreated when we were independent, a segregated society, if you will, a country, through racism. But we have to work through that. We have, if you don't know your history, then that's a big problem that we're having right now with the mistrust of this vaccine because of what's happened. Learn from the history. The Tuskegee trial was unethical because the men were not given syphilis by the healthcare providers. They had syphilis through their social behavior. The unethical part was that when penicillin became available in about 1945, 1947, which is the curative treatment for syphilis, it was withheld. That was wrong. That was wrong. That was wrong. And that was not discovered until 1972. This trial went for about 40 plus years. Now, that just didn't happen to African Americans. Hitler did the same thing to the Jews. Adolf Hitler did the same thing to the Jews. He did what they call the Nuremberg trials, not the wartime trials, but the medical trial. They sterilized young boys and girls with radiation therapy. They took Jewish men and subjected them to freezing cold water to see how long they could live. They would take them up in fighter jets with no canopy over to see how much they could tolerate. This is what Hitler did. So it's not only happened to us as a race of people, but it happened to the Jewish people too, okay? So this part of your history you have to know. And now science in this country and the world does not allow that. It's unethical to do. That's why all hospitals have ethics committees and whatnot. All clinical trials have eligibility and ineligibility criteria and whatnot. So those are all safeguards that have been put into place to protect you, okay? And I can tell you, having practiced oncology for 35 years, I could get the African-American woman to enroll on the breast trial or the lung trial. I could not get the African-American, after 35 years of practicing oncology, I could not get one African-American man to participate in any clinical trial. I participated in the prostate prevention trial, but I could not get one African-American man to participate in the trial.
So why do African Americans need to trust this vaccine and healthcare providers now, based on the history that you've shared? Because there is some concern.
Because you need to know your history. That because you can't do those kind of trials anymore. You can't do those kind of studies anymore. The Pfizer trial, the Moderna trial, those 200 plus clinical trials that are underway worldwide now, they all have safeguards in place. They all have safeguards in place. They all, my family is a Washington family of Casey, South Carolina. We meet once a month. And once a month on the agenda is that myself and my nurse practitioner, we talk about the importance of taking this vaccine. And of all of my relatives who are 65 and above, 90+% as of today have gotten the vaccine.
So one of the questions that's come up is, what's the next group that's going to be eligible for the vaccine? And I will share with you based on what we know. We're not sure right now. Right now, you have to be 65 plus, or you have to be a healthcare provider. There are some funeral home directors that are eligible. You can go on DHEC's website and see who's eligible. And if you are eligible, let me encourage you to consider receiving the vaccine. We do believe, based on all the information that's coming out from the governor's office, that educators are probably going to be in the next tier. You can sort of see that coming down the pike. Some people would ask, why aren't they already? Well, that's determined by DHEC and the governor, and we're just setting up for it. Again, let me encourage you to go on prismahealth.org, and it's been put in the chat box, prismahealth.org/MyChart, and you can go ahead and set up your own MyChart application, or you can dial 833-2-PRISMA, 833-2-PRISMA to receive information on the vaccine. Dr. Jones, I've heard you talk about people who have had the virus, and sometimes people are using the term long haulers. You sort of talked a little bit about that earlier. I think it's worthy of people knowing a little bit more about that. Some people get the virus and they snap right back. Some people, a little bit longer. You want to talk a little bit about that? Yes.
Let me first say, there's no black line and white line for this virus, people.
Right.
Just so we're clear.
Thank you.
There's also an amazing young African-American doctor, Dr. Corbett. She's 34 years old. She works for NIH. She was the lead researcher for developing strategies for vaccines. So we representing y'all up and down this pipeline, okay?
Right.
Everyone from the NIH down to your everyday in the trenches physicians like myself, we are representing and we are trying to hold people's feet to the fire and stuff like that. But let's talk about something that really should be everybody's concern. And we're going to talk about this later on. Like, it's going to be all over the news in another few years. And we're going to be, why didn't anybody tell us? And that is long-term effects of COVID. So I get a lot of people that got COVID, were not sick enough to go into the hospital, but really has some long-lasting side effects. I've got 30-year-olds on oxygen that were not on oxygen before. I've got young people that have complete memory loss, like just cannot remember anything, having a hard time doing their job. I've put a couple people on permanent disability. And here's what you need to know. Like, I don't know that there is enough FMLA short-term disability that exists to make you whole. And I can't promise you that if you get COVID, that I can make you whole.
Right.
And we've got a lot of tools out there, right? We've got things we understand about medicine. We've got, things that we understand about disease processes, what happens when different organs are affected. But we don't have any one particular treatment that promises that everybody who gets sick with COVID will go back to their baseline. The problem with that in African-American communities is that most of us use our bodies to work. Right? We're service oriented. We're the stylists, we're the techs, we're the janitors, we're the garbage men, we're, the restaurant workers, we're the cooks, we're all these things where you got to show up and be able to use your whole body to get the job done. So we're talking about your livelihood and we're talking about your ability to protect your family. And sometimes after COVID, that gets significantly impacted. And I have not put everybody back to work. I have not, everybody is not. Some people are still coughing. I got people who are coughing. They got COVID in March of 2020. They're still coughing. I am sincere when I say we're waiting. Maybe they'll stop because everything we've thrown at them is not working. Sending you to the specialist won't work. But, we do that too because it makes you all feel better. and you come back and you're still coughing. So there are things that, you know, are happening to people who have COVID that aren't curable at this moment. And it'll take years for us to figure it out, because research is a long game, right? So those are things you really need to know about COVID. Another thing is you can get COVID again. So I got a lot of people, particularly my healthcare workers, my Black healthcare workers, that are going, you know what, it's been almost a year. I haven't had COVID yet, or when I got it, it seemed pretty mild to me. So maybe I don't need to take this vaccine. Maybe I'm gonna do all right. There's no guarantee that each infection of COVID is gonna be the exact same. All right. Also, you can get COVID again. So I literally have a guy that is like, he comes in, I don't know who he's getting COVID from, but he comes in, it feels like every 4 months, and he keeps testing positive, and he's like, this is fake. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not fake. Like you're sicker every time I see you. And yeah, you got COVID again, you can catch it again. And so it's a risk that, you know, we've got to take. And the third thing I want to say is that I do not think, you know, I don't think it's a matter of if you get exposed. It's a matter of when you get exposed. So the question really becomes, when I get exposed, how do I want to feel about that, right? How do I want to be armed about it? Like, what do I want to have set up? Like, you know, what's going to be okay for me? What's not going to be okay for me? Because COVID is very contagious. It easily passed from human to human, which is the big problem. You know, we're 2.48 million dead already worldwide. And so we know, and that's on top of like 112 million people infected or something like that. And so you will get exposed at some point. Like we've got to go to the grocery store. We've got to, you know, at some point we've got to work, you know, maybe we don't have to all work at once, but we do things. We have to socialize. We have to check on parents or other family members that need our help. And so there's interaction that's going to happen. And so we will get exposed. And the question becomes, what do we want to do about that?
We've heard someone say that, as Dr. Jones has said, we're going to likely be exposed. So you got a choice: the vaccine, the virus, or ventilator. At some point in our time frame, that's what we're going to be exposed to. One of the comments that I hear, and then we'll try to take questions and then maybe try to wrap this up, is another comment that I hear is, I'm going to wait and see. So let's see. They've been waiting and they've been seeing. And what they have seen so far is very few. There have been some side effects from the vaccine, no question about that. But in America, 500,000 people have died. That's what we've seen from the virus alone, and not talk about the number of people in ICU and in the hospital that have been hospitalized. So we're going to open up for any other questions. But here's an ask before anyone chimes off. We're going to ask 3 or 4 things of you on here. Our leader, Pastor Scott, has already done his part, and I was just going to ask him, and I'll ask the rest of you, consider taking the vaccine. That's number one. Let's not talk about anyone else, but you consider taking the vaccine. And so that's the first ask. That's important because you all are influencers, not only in your church, in your community, but especially in your family. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So you consider taking the vaccine, and I'm not trying to push you toward that. I'm just trying to encourage you. All right. So that's number one. Number two, if you do take the vaccine, make sure you take a picture of yourself taking the vaccine, because I want you to put that on social media. I'm not a big social media guy, but put it on social media so others can see it, and especially send it to family members, which is important. Number three, the third ask we're going to make is consider having a family Zoom meeting, as Dr. Wise said, and have a discussion about COVID and health in general, all those chronic health issues that he talked about. But consider having a conversation. And in that conversation, they're going to bring up Tuskegee, and they're going to bring up medical mistrust. You can at least try to share information based on what you've heard, what you've learned, to try to help offset some of that. And then the fourth thing that we would ask you to consider is, if you decide not to take the vaccine, we understand if you make that decision, but we would ask that you not talk negative about it in front of other people, so that it will allow them to consider making their own enlightened self-interest. Just think about it. Just think about this for a second. If Pastor Scott got up in the pulpit and said, hey, I'm not taking the vaccine. I don't care what anybody says. I think it's wrong. I think it's hurting people. Probably the majority of us are going to listen to that because he's a credible source. And if Harrison Ridge stood up and said that, if that's a credible source. Sandra Sims was on the hospital board. If she said that to even her family members, I'll give you an example. I was talking with a friend and his dad is in his mid 70s and his dad says, I don't think I'm going to take the vaccine. And his son who's in his mid 50s, the dad asked the son, are you considering taking it? And the son said, yes, Dad, I am going to take it. And in an instant, he changed his mind. The dad did. So we are influencers. So if he had said no, the dad would have said no. I'll tell you this personal story. And this is totally being honest, which is what we want to be doing these calls. Back in October and November, even though I worked for the hospital, I was a definite no. I wasn't taking it. There was no way that I was going to take the vaccine. And I'll just jump to the end and say I've taken both doses, no side effects. But as I started listening to people like Dr. Wise, Dr. Jones, some of the doctors, and listening to and reading and understanding, I moved to maybe. Then I kept listening and learning and hearing about the efficacy of Pfizer and the Moderna, 95% efficacy. I take the flu vaccine every year. And without hesitation. Part of the reason is I work for the hospital. And so then I moved from maybe to probably. I said, I'm probably going to take this vaccine. And then here was the interesting thing that moved me to definite. It was the Saturday before Christmas, a family Zoom meeting. My son and my daughter were on a Zoom meeting. One lives in Tampa, the other lives in Memphis. And we had to have a family conversation about them not coming home because of the virus. My wife's mother is incapacitated and weakened immune system. And so I said to my two kids, I said, if you decide to come home, a few things you've got to do. Number one, you've got to take the test before you leave your respective town. Number two, you're going to have to be tested once you arrive here. Number three, I'm going to quarantine you for about 4 or 5 days. Number four, you can't go out to see any of your friends. Number five, they can't come over here. So we decided that they were not going to come home. And so what made me decide was I don't want to go through that for Christmas again. I want to get back to some sense of normalcy so that we can have our family together this coming Christmas. And that made me decide to go take the test. So you all have a why. Either it's a mom or dad, a grandmother or grandfather, your grandchildren, your children, your relatives. You want to get back and you want to hug them and you want to have dinner and you want to go out. Those are some whys that I think that would help you consider taking the vaccine. So those are a few things that we would ask of you to consider. And in your family Zoom meetings, if you need one of us to come on and just share briefly some information, we'll be happy to do that. But let me open the floor as we prepare to close this out to see if there are any pressing questions before we leave.
Mr. Avery, I see your statement here. How unlikely are you to get COVID-19 again if you've already had both shots and still wash your hands and wear your PPE? Well, all of those together significantly drop your risk of both transmission and infection, right? So the vaccine prevents disease, right? Not infection. Which is why when you add in your hand washing and your PPE, that makes this very, very good. So if you've had the COVID-19 vaccine, you've had both shots, and it's been at least 2 weeks since you had your second vaccine, you are what we consider fully vaccinated, right? Your immune system has responded appropriately, and you've got a full function immune system that has seen COVID, that's seen the M protein, because we had either Pfizer or Moderna right now, and so you are good to go. So I think all those things combined together makes your risk of having COVID and your risk of transmitting COVID very low. Any other questions?
Pastor Scott, we thank you and members of First Nazareth and thank all the participants.
Hold on, Mr. Ford. There's one other question.
All right. Go ahead.
Could you explain the difference between Moderna and Pfizer other than cold storage requirements? Okay, so let me be all the way real with you. There's not enough difference between the two of them for the day-to-day person to care.
That's right. Absolutely.
I would
right.
not be in line. And if I got up to the front of the line, they said, you got Moderna. And I was like, dang, I thought I was going to get some Pfizer. Let me go back to the back. I would recommend you not do that.
That's right.
Go ahead and get that good Moderna or that good Pfizer, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
So they're almost identical in the studies. One is 94% effective. One is 95% effective. One requires a 21-day wait. One requires a 28-day wait. One had 30,000 participants. One had 40,000 participants.
Right.
And even down to the side effects, they're almost identical. So there's not enough difference in the two at this point to matter. And because distribution and who's got access to it is such a big deal, sometimes the decision is made for you because you get what you get depending on where you are, what state, what city. Are you rural? Are you urban? Like, what does the health system have? So I don't know that there's been enough difference for me to tell you to pick one way or the other. I think your question still boils down to, do you want the vaccine?
Right.
Yes or no?
Yeah. And I would add to that, Dr. Jones, I mean, we take the flu vaccine, and the flu vaccine is probably about, even for the high dose for those who are 65 or older, is about 45% effective. We'll take the flu vaccine, but now we've got a vaccine for this COVID virus that's twice as effective, but we won't take it. But we'll take the flu vaccine. Yeah, we've got this COVID illness that you stand a significant chance of dying from, as opposed to the flu. You can still die from the flu. 20, 30,000 cases a year in this country from people die from the flu. But we'll take the flu shot, but we're hesitant to take the COVID shot.
Right.
That's put it in that context.
And there's one more question. If you're exposed to the virus, is it 100% certain that you will get the virus? So nothing is 100%. There are no guarantees in life,
right? Except
for death and taxes, I suppose. But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So depending on how you're exposed, right? What kind of, PPE equipment did you have on? Was the person infected? Where were they in their infection? Were they a highest risk of, transmission or not? So nothing is 100% guaranteed. Right. But if you are exposed to the virus, like the virus really does love you a lot, and there's a good chance that you may get it. Mm-hmm. From Facebook, if you ever had COVID, how long should you wait before taking the vaccine? 2 weeks. I like things simple. 2 weeks.
That's right. Keep it simple.
Vince.
Yes.
This is Chicken. I have a question. How y'all doing?
All right. How you doing?
Good.
All right.
This is for Dr. Wise. Dr. Wise, you made the statement that some of the basketball players and the other ball players, they get tested right before they go out on the floor to play. Mm-hmm. But isn't it also true that even though they get tested and they don't test positive at the time, they still could have the virus and it hasn't been in their system long enough to be positive?
True. That's true. But they're getting the test that's 95+% sensitive and specific. Okay, they're getting the Cadillac of the test, so they have very few false negatives. Okay, that's the kind of test that they're getting.
So so you're right. So there could be a 4 to 8 day incubation period.
Right.
So the virus can be there and you not know it. So that's why you hear people ask others to quarantine themselves for a period of time before they come around and then get tested. But the professional athletes are getting tested all the time, around the clock. I don't know about the high school athletes, but
the collegiate athletes are. So one of my very best friends is Joni Taylor. She's the head coach at the University of Georgia women's basketball program. And I can tell you that they get tested twice a week, right? And they're getting PCR testing. So PCR testing is what Dr. Wise was saying was the the really sensitive and specific one. As doctors, we get PCR testing. So whenever, a patient comes in here and decides to expose me to COVID because you love me so much, then I have to go down to the hospital and I have to get that PCR test. And it comes back very quickly, but it's very accurate. Now, what I tell my patients is that if you've been exposed to COVID, you should wait somewhere between day 5 and day 8. So if you get a phone call saying, you and TT hung out last night and then TT calls you this morning like, girl, I got COVID. And you're like, oh, shoot, let me go get tested. You should wait. I want you to wait at least 5 days before you get tested. And you do need to stay at home. And that did not mean, let me run to the grocery store real quick and get everything I need in the event that I got COVID in 5 days. No, I mean, stay at home at that time, wait your 5 days, and then go get tested.
Exactly.
So y'all know Dr. Jones was an all-star basketball player at the University of Alabama.
Whoa.
From the south side.
So athletics is dear to my
Chicago.
heart.
All right.
Right. So I'm from, from south side of Chicago all the way to the south.
Wow.
And I've done my grand tour of the South. So my family's here by way of Mississippi, which is how we got to Chicago. If anybody knows their migration patterns, and then I played University of Alabama basketball. I trained in Chicago at a little small hospital called Cook County Hospital on the west side of Chicago, where I was chief resident for my residency, and then I found my way down here to South Carolina. So. I love both medicine, Black people, and basketball. There you go. If you have an allergy, if you've had an allergy to the flu vaccine, then you are one of the people that fall in that exception to the rule, and we need to make some special considerations for you. So that may mean that you need to go talk to the allergy immunology doctor to figure out if and when you should get it. So I think long-term, the answer is going to be yes, you can get it, because this vaccine is pretty clean. It doesn't really have a lot in it. It's got some sucrose, some fat that's the capsule and the actual mRNA in those. I'm not really sure about the Johnson & Johnson and some of the other ones coming down, but this one is pretty clean. So I think people are still able to get it, but sometimes they have you bring your EpiPen, and then you may have to sit for longer than 15 minutes just so that we get to observe you to make sure nothing happens. Is the vaccine safe for people who have lupus? So yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we want people who have autoimmune diseases, who have chronic diseases. Your kidneys don't work, you got diabetes, you're obese, you got hypertension, you got lung disease, all those things. We do want you to get the vaccine. If you've had a severe reaction from prior immunization, should you take it? Maybe not. Maybe not. So if you've had severe reactions to vaccines before, then maybe you are one of the people that's got to wait to figure out if this is right for you. What it probably means is that you need it delivered in a different kind of way. So it does not mean all hope is lost and you're never going to get the vaccine. It just simply means that we've got to figure out a different way, maybe a different environment, so that we give you the vaccine safely. Y'all are bringing these questions in. I'm reading them. If y'all got them, type them.
Hello. This is Dr. Fitchett. I'm kind of late joining you, but one of the things that I have found people asking is, if you've gotten the first vaccine and you kind of miss your date for the second one, is it okay to go later, after the 21 or 28 days?
Yes.
And up to how much later? People tend to think that the first vaccine will some kind of way die out. But up to how much later can you go and get the second one?
It won't die out. And so what we're talking about is what the research said, right? So when they did the research got approved for 21 to 28 days within reason. But based on what we know about vaccines, like, it's a booster, right? The second dose is a booster. So for some reason, I don't know, you had to go take care of someone and you find yourself a week removed from the date of your vaccine, I still want you to go into the facility and let them know that you were due for your second dose and get that vaccine. And so that we can accommodate you, because the booster is what's kicking in that solid immune response that you've had. And so you do have, antibodies to the M protein hanging out, but you should get your booster. So, and maybe you need to do it in other states. So I tell people, like, listen, you can show up anywhere. You got your card to say, I have had the first dose. I am due for my second dose. It is a priority nationwide that people get a complete vaccination. So please go. Like, don't assume that we're not going to give it to you. Please go to wherever they're handing them out, explain what is happening, and most of us can figure out a way to make that happen for you.
Yeah, that's not a problem. And let me recommend that the card that you receive, take a picture of it with your phone. So in case you lose that card becomes more and more important. So it gives a lot of information. So please take a picture of it and store that card in a place that you'll be able. One of the questions that has come up in another meeting is for young people, because we're anticipating that the hesitancy rate is going to increase the younger the age group is. And so you're going to start to see things like, that there are going to be places where young people want to travel, that they might ask a question, have you been vaccinated? They may even ask that question. Airlines might do that. Hotels might do that. We don't know. And that's why it's best to have that card and have a picture of it, and to take the vaccine as we mentioned earlier. So,
Fauci just mentioned that early on when we started the vaccination, that you may have to have your vaccine card.
Right.
You may want to get it laminated or something and just keep it with you, because that's going to be required. It's going to be required.
Right.
We've got a question about the side effects from either vaccine. So, they've been overall mild, but a little bit variable. Most people complain that, the first shot they get some arm tenderness at the site. The second dose seems to be very variable, and so it depends on who you're asking. I had both doses. I had mild symptoms. Arm pain was all I got. Although I did cancel working out for the whole week in preparation of being sick, but I didn't get any of that. So I had to go back to my regular routine. Okay. So, but some people get arm pain. I've seen people have, fatigue, fever, chills, feel very bad for 24, 36 hours. Most people have short-term symptoms, and then they tend to recover and do fine. So it's been variable. My wife and I were tested several times prior to being vaccinated. Do you advise continuing to be tested from time to time? So I have been tested many times, and I'm sorry, I don't look forward to, that. I don't look forward to that test. So, I'm not just signing up just because, you have to expose me before I get tested. I'm just not in the business of rolling down there so they can stick that tube down my throat through my nose. But if you enjoy that and you want to get tested for any reason, you can, but I would wait until I was exposed. If you've been exposed, you have a legitimate exposure, you want to wait your 5 days and then get tested, I think that's fine. What you have to know is that after you've been vaccinated on your second dose and your 2 weeks have passed, for the first 90 days of your vaccination period, you do not have to quarantine if you think you might have been exposed to the virus. So you may not have to get tested as often as you have, but if for some reason you've had an exposure and you suddenly start having symptoms that you think are consistent with COVID, then I would, in that case, go get tested, but I wouldn't periodically test. Unless you're a student athlete. If you are a student athlete on here, do not tell your coach I told you that you could not get tested. You have to get tested. But everybody else, get tested if you absolutely have an exposure.
Yeah. If in doubt, get tested.
Do we have any show of proof to any immune disease in order to get do we have to show proof of any immune disease in order to get the vaccine? You don't have to have proof of anything to get your vaccine, except for proof that you are a human being and that you want to get the vaccine.
Yeah, and they're going to ask you those questions. They're going to ask you that. They got that panel of questions they're going to ask you, so.
Right. So that's all the proof you need. Do you want to take it? Do you meet the age requirements, right? Based on who they're seeing, but you just have to meet whatever, phase we're in, and you can get it. I think what you're getting at is titers. So you might be a college student that's asking this question, but you don't need titers for this vaccine. That'll probably come down the line. How long do you need to wait to get vaccine if you had COVID? 2 weeks. Unless you got monoclonal therapy, then you need to probably wait your 90 days. If you had monoclonal therapy, you had some kind of infusion, you don't know what it is, but we sent you to some center, you got some medicine through an IV, we told you it was going to help you recover from COVID, then you may have had monoclonal therapy, and in that case, you need to ask for it. Why do some places ask for your insurance if the shot is free? They asked me for my insurance, I just didn't give it to them.
Yeah, I just give it to them.
I'm very soulful, right? I came from the same place y'all came from, so I didn't get in my insurance because I was like, I don't know what you need my insurance for.
Let's ask Vince.
Some locations are asking for insurance information, but let me go back a step. You should not be charged for the COVID test at all.
Exactly.
But what is happening now is they're asking for insurance information because some of that can be reimbursed to the organization, but it shouldn't count against your deductible, your copay, or anything, and no one should ever ask you to pay for anything as far as the COVID test is concerned.
Right.
But they are asking for, some places are asking for insurance information.
Yeah.
Same thing that would happen if you went to CVS to get the flu shot. They would ask you for your insurance information, but you don't have to pay anything.
Right. I think you're clarifying, whoever sent this, that lupus or sarcoidosis, might be the thing you were talking about. So if you've got lupus or sarcoidosis, that in itself does not make you ineligible for getting the vaccine. But sometimes, depending on how bad your autoimmune diseases are, so that's lupus, that's sarcoid, that's MS, that's all the autoimmune family, you sometimes get medicines that change how you respond, how your immune system responds. And based on what medicine that is, you may need to have that medicine held for a little bit and then go get your vaccine. So you also may fall into that 90-day window. So if you are on medicines, you have an autoimmune disease, and you're on a bunch of different medicines to make your symptoms stable, then you do have to call your primary care doctor, or you have to call your rheumatologist who's managing those to see how we go about getting you set up to get your vaccine. So it's not an automatic no, but you might need a few more logistics to get you set up to take it.
Right.
I do know someone who went to get the COVID vaccine. He, within a few days prior, he had taken the pneumonia vaccine, and they did not allow him to take the COVID vaccine. They asked him to wait a number of days.
Right.
And so I did hear about that.
2 weeks.
Yeah, right.
You're just going to jazz up your immune system. That's what's going to happen when you got the pneumovac vaccine and whatnot. It's turning on his immune system and whatnot. So he's got a hyper elevated immune system from the pneumonia vaccine. So yes, he'll need to wait for several days and whatnot. And another question that I saw, I think, was that can I go from one vaccine to another vaccine? If you've gotten both doses of Pfizer, Moderna, and then there's another vaccine that's out there, you're going to be ineligible. You're not going to be able to get another vaccine. Okay. That's ineligible. You don't need to get two different vaccines. It's not necessary. The goal is to turn on your immune system so it recognizes the spike protein. That's all you need. You don't need to take multiple vaccines. In fact, they're not going to give it to you because on the list of questions, they're going to ask you that.
And then somebody said, can you explain refraining from ibuprofen and other painkillers prior to the vaccine? Well, so if you are in pain before you happen to get your vaccine and you use Tylenol, ibuprofen to treat that pain, then I want you to treat your pain. I am not a fan of pre-treating for the vaccine. So I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm going to go get my vaccine. I'm about to do 800 milligrams of ibuprofen." Well, you don't have a fever yet. Like, what are we treating? Like, we don't know if you're going to have a fever. I didn't have a fever. There's lots of people who don't have fevers. There's lots of people that do just fine. Now, some people really do end up with a fever afterwards. And a fever really is proof that you've got a functioning immune system. Okay. Right. Now, sometimes a fever is too high and that proof goes a little too far, right? And so, some fevers just simply need to be treated because they just shouldn't be that high. But some people are pre-treating and you've got a temperature of 99.5. That is not a fever. 100.4 and higher is the definition of a fever, not 99, not 100.1, not 100.2 or 100.3. 100.4 defines a fever. And so I don't want people taking large amounts of Tylenol and ibuprofen in anticipation that the whole system is going to collapse. You don't have to do that. So if you are in pain and you take it anyway, then I want you to take your medicines, because I'm sure your doctor made a plan, because you absolutely have a primary care doctor. I have no doubt. But if you are just taking it because you're getting ready for something, well, let's just wait and let's see what happens. Exactly. And then if you have a fever of 100.4 or higher and you need to take something, then you can take it per the instructions on the back of the bottle.
One of the things that I've seen that's pretty interesting is that over the past year or two, the life expectancy for African Americans has decreased. And a lot of it is attributable to COVID. There are a lot of things that we have been last in. Y'all, we don't want to be last in this. We don't want to be last in the vaccination rate. We're way behind now by all indications. Mm-hmm. With every group. We are behind. African Americans are choosing not to take. They're choosing to wait and see, or they're choosing not to take it. This call tonight is so important, and many others that we're having, because our goal is to try to help influence you to consider taking the vaccine so that you can influence others. Because if you look at the data points, we are behind, and we're dying at a faster rate.
That's right.
So we're behind in taking the vaccines, and we're dying at a faster rate, or hospitalized. Yeah. And so please consider, as we shared earlier, being an influencer. Please consider taking the vaccine. Consider taking a picture of it. Consider sharing it with others. And speak up on it. Have family conversations about this based on some of the things that you've heard. And again, I'll send a toolkit out to Ms. Jones and Ms. Roberts to make sure that they have that, so that they can share that information with all of you as well.
Well, the Publix has started Monday. They start giving the vaccines this Monday coming. And Walgreens and CVS, they now have notices on their windows. We don't have the vaccine yet, but they're getting them very soon. And I think that will certainly cause a big improvement in the compliance rate with African Americans, because some of the problem is just a matter of convenience. A lot of people don't drive, or they are not near a place that's giving the vaccines. But I think once the Walgreens and CVS and Publix have access to the vaccines, I'm sure you'll see an uptake in African Americans.
I agree.
Sounds good. We hope so.
Brother Ford.
Yes, sir.
Let me join my pastor in thanking you all for coming, you and your team. And for the record, we've gotten our first shot. The second shot is due tomorrow morning.
All right.
And I'm one of the greatest advocates for getting the vaccine.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Thanks to me.
All right.
Yeah.
What about my good Kappa friend on here? Deacon Melvin, my main man.
Where is he?
He's on mute.
I'm trying to unmute myself.
I know how you feel.
Yeah, Elaine and I got our second dose 2 weeks ago yesterday.
All right.
So we're good to go.
Elaine is my little sister, so that's why I'm checking on him. Make sure he's taking care of her.
Now, James, tell the crew how we know each other. James, tell the crew how we know each other. Tell the team how we know each other.
Oh, man, we were born and raised over in Casey together.
That's right.
We're in the dusty streets over there across the river.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, if they want to see Black people get their shots, they need to go to Fort Jackson. I mean, Fort Jackson is bombarded with Black veterans. We are there getting our shots. You hear me?
Great. Sounds good. Sounds good.
The VA too. I think the VA. I think a lot of them African American veterans are getting theirs at the VA too.
Yeah, I think that they're not exactly. So it's not everybody, especially the older Blacks. We are getting our shots. You can't get into Fort Jackson's gym at this time because there's so many people, getting that vaccine.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw in, and talking to one of our members, he informed me that his 95-year-old mother contracted COVID, but the doctor said it did not do her as bad as it could have because she had taken the first vaccine. So I think that ought to be encouragement enough for us to see the necessity of going ahead and getting the vaccine, even if you do get exposed.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
Yeah. And Pastor, we just, it was on the national news. We just vaccinated a young lady, was 111 years old within the last few days here in Columbia, and it made the national news. Yeah.
Oh, God bless her.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great.
So thank all of you. We appreciate it. Let me give you a little bit more information. My email address is Vince, VINCE, .Ford@prismahealth.org. Vince.Ford@prismahealth.org. If you have any other questions that may come up, shoot it to me by email, and I'll get it to Dr. Jones or Dr. Wise, and I can get you a response back. Please, please, please be informed. Do not get your information off the internet unless it's a credible source. Get away from the hallway and parking lot conversations. And I know your uncle knows a whole lot about checkers and shining shoes, but he's not the expert in COVID. Talk to the pastor, Dr. Wise or Dr. Jones. I see Sarah Gay is on here, and talk to someone who really understands, and the young lady that's a physician. Get credible information. That's all we're asking. Be an informed decision maker, and make a decision that's in your enlightened self-interest. What's best for you and what's best for your family. That is what we would recommend. Pastor, thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of your congregation tonight. And we appreciate that. I'll give you the final words, and then we'll roll out.
Well, once again, I want to thank you, Dr. Jones and Dr. Wise, for leading us in the session, and certainly want to thank all who joined in, because I think that it's a very important thing for us to do to facilitate this process. Mm-hmm. Also, let me throw out that this has been recorded as well as live streamed, so that if there are persons who want to get this information from this session, they can do so by contacting the church at 803-254.
We have memorized that number by now.
The reason why they're laughing, I extend the invitation Sunday and tell people that if they want to join the church or accept discipleship, they can call the church number. And they know I give it real slow. 803-254-6232. Bow together in prayer. God, again, we thank you for giving us the privilege and opportunity to come together. We're grateful for these enlightened minds being willing to share with us information. We pray, God, that it will be as seed sown in good soil, bringing forth much fruit, not only for the kingdom, but for the well-being of all humanity. We are believing you for the healing of the land, and therefore we're claiming the victory as we close out this session, seeing it by faith in the strong and satisfying name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Ms. Griffin, good to see you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you all.
Thanks, you and Dr. Wise, Dr. Jones. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank everybody. Brother Scriven. All right.
Thank y'all, Vince.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Wise. Thank
Lane. I see you, Lane.
Hey.
What's up, little sis? All right.
Take care. Great
all right.
job.
Okay. All right.
All right, y'all get off.
All right.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Yes.
You know anything about South Bend Sins?
No, tell me more.
Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Which Ebenezer? You know, black folks got an Ebenezer church in every city in the United States of America.
I'll go out on South Bend.
Oh, yes. Okay. That's not my church. I went to St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church, and then I went to New Life Covenant as a medical student, as a resident, but I'd never been to Ebenezer Baptist.
All right. Okay.
So, you know, there's lots of church. I'm a preacher's kid, so I grew up in the church. So, you know, you know, so I've been to a lot of churches. Back when we used to have real like 4 o'clock service. Remember the evening service? You go out and have dinner, you come back.
Oh yeah.
And you go to visit the churches. Golly, I used to be like, Jesus, wow. Lord, they singing so long. But I was a kid. I didn't know. I was different.
We need to go back in the old time way.
Yeah.
Oh, you trying to get up under the tent in the summer? Is that kind of old school you talking about? Let me know. I'll bring a fan, and I'll come to a revival. But revivals, you better really be a saint if you want to endure a revival for a week, because it's hot. Y'all have them in the summertime. The tents are hot. Ain't no air conditioning. You bringing the seniors water. Lord Jesus,
we cut revival 3 nights inside, so we know we not going.
Right now we do them inside, but we don't do evening service anymore. Evening service doesn't happen. Everybody has, 7 a.m., 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 a.m. You have all these services back to back to back to back to back. That kind of becomes the end of it, because they're trying to give everybody the opportunity to pick their time, which I understand.
Yeah. And then the poor pastor's worn out by that time.
Worn out, which is why you see so many pastors. Now you see churches that got 6 pastors, because if you got to preach 5 services every Sunday plus Bible study, and some people have Bible study twice a week, that's a lot of preaching for one pastor. I don't know how y'all do it. I tip my hat.
Have you found a church here in Columbia, Dr. Jones?
I am not at this time. Don't tell my
tune
mother.
in virtually to First Nazareth sometimes when you're free.
When the world opens back up, you be trying to catch them online, but it's not the same as being able to go into a church and sit and get the whole service. So
yeah, but see, when you get it online, then when we go back to real service, then you'll have a good flavor for it.
You have a good idea. I know. I need to do better about doing it online. You know, I just, today was my last, I promised a friend of mine that I was not going to work on Sundays, because what normally ends up happening is that the week is so slammed. You're trying to take care of so much that all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh, Sunday, you know, let me, you know, catch up on some work. And so it's a bad habit that I'm trying to break. So one of my mentors told me that, you know, don't do that. As a young doctor, you get into those habits and you do them. And I picked them up. I picked all the bad habits up that they told me not to do. So I've got to stop working on Sundays so that I can, you know, be free to do other things like go to church.
Yeah. Physician, heal thyself.
I know.
Amen.
I know. So, you know, it's hard. And I had to learn to stop calling patients on Sundays too, because I would be calling because it's my free day. And it used to freak my patients out. They'd be like, oh God, Dr. Jones calling on a Sunday. I was like, no, just calling to let you know that your labs look normal. So I'm not working on a Sunday.
But that's your compassion and your caring doctor. So
that's right.
That's about being there.
I know, but I'm gonna be a tired doctor here if I don't stop. So I have stopped doing that. And so on the weekends, I am well doing, I guess, what everybody else does: clean, grocery shop, you know, do stuff like that. I just need to probably listen to some church. My mother just
tune us in 2351 Gervais Street. They got a country common and crazy pastor down there.
Amen, Pastor. Amen.
You know what? Is it the one on the corner? Like, it's the big church.
Little church with the big heart.
The little church with the big heart. I love it. I love it. I used to live off of Gervais Street before I bought my house in Earlwood. So I know where Gervais Street is. Because I used to go to the gym at Orange Theory in Forest Park. So I had to pass down Gervais on my way to the gym.
Yeah,
we were across from the Chinese restaurant. So
I think I know where that is.
Yeah,
I know where that is. Yeah. So
all right,
roll is back up. I will be doing it.
Dr. Jones, Dr. Wise, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Pastor, thank you for pulling it together.
Good night.
I just went along.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night, y'all. It's been so good. You know, hopefully it was helpful, but y'all have a good night, okay?
It was. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.